When I was 16, I went to an online charter school. There are quotes around online because it had an actual building you had to go to in a sketchy strip mall. Somehow this place was actually accredited by the state. I started going there because I was 16 and I thought I knew better than my dad at the time, who wanted me to stay in public school. In order to get home, I would have to get on a bus. And the buses in my city are really cheap and there are a lot of strange people who get on them. Naturally, I had several instances with people on the public transit, but one sticks out in my mind. One day, I was sitting on the bus stop bench when a grown man approached me while also waiting for the bus. He was tall, older, and wore dirty clothes. His teeth were all yellowed, which is the second most distinct thing that sticks out to me now besides his mustache. More than likely, he was homeless. The first thing he said to me after sitting just a little too close was, "Hi, what's your name?" It was weird and a little awkward, but nothing too bad. Despite this, it was setting off creep alarms in the back of my head, so I gave him a nervous smile and a fake name. There was no way I was going to give this guy my real name. Now, I have always looked much younger than I actually am. Even now at 18, I still get comments from people who believe I'm a freshman in high school. This is due in part to having a round face and still dealing with acne. This is what makes what happened next extra weird. He got closer and told me, "You know, you're very pretty." I wasn't used to compliments at the time. To a certain extent, I'm still not. However, I knew I didn't want them from this guy. I just continued smiling nervously and scooted away from him on the bus stop bench. I remember his breath being pretty rancid, and him trying to scoot closer to me still. "You got a boyfriend?" was the next thing he asked. I'm gay, but I did answer yes just to his question. At the time, I was actually trying to force myself to date a close friend who was a man and liked me, so it wasn't a total lie. Even if it wasn't though, I still would have said yes. But this did not deter him. He tried to touch my hair more than once, rested his hand on my knee and tried to move it to my thigh, and other weird stuff. The next thing that he pressed me for was my number. I didn't actually believe this guy had a phone, but in case he managed to find a payphone in the year 2017, I decided to give him a fake number just in case. I was dreading getting on the bus, where I would have to ride all the way home to an empty apartment for hours with a window that had a broken lock. Even if he didn't plan on doing anything that day, what if he did another time? I didn't want this man knowing where I lived. When the bus finally got there, after what felt like forever, I was terrified but unsurprised to find that he got on the same one. I made a beeline for a seat next to an old woman where he couldn't sit next to me. He sat in a close-by seat and kept glancing at me for what felt like forever until I had an idea. The next stop was right by a convenience store where a friend of mine named James worked. I didn't know if he would be working at the time, but it was honestly my only hope. And if that didn't work, I could at least go inside and call the cops and my mom. When the bus stopped, I got off of it and ran to the store as fast as I could. Sure enough, James was working. I checked to see if the guy had followed me to discover that he had and was walking towards the store. I quickly explained to James the fact that I had been followed by a creepy older man, and I didn't know what to do. Now, he wasn't a bodybuilder or anything, but James was a big guy, not the kind of guy you want to mess with, and he told me that he would take care of it. When the creep entered, James approached him and asked him if he needed anything. The old guy glanced at me and said he didn't need anything but was going to wait outside if that was okay. James told him no, it wasn't, and that if he did, he'd be calling the police. The creep did not appear to like the sounds of that. Seeing his head, he had no chance of ever beating James in a physical confrontation. He left in a hurry. After I was sure that he was gone, I completely broke down and cried for a good long time in that store. James may have saved my life that day, or at least saved me from something horrific. I ended up calling my mom to come get me. She was upset about having to leave work, but when I told her the whole thing, That was basically the end of my online school and my bus days. I finished my semester and got rides from my grandfather, and went back to public school the semester after that. I, a European woman, am currently staying in a South American capital. And being a foreigner, I guess I stand out a little, but I didn't feel threatened or in danger at all during the month that I spent there. Until yesterday. I was waiting for the bus alone at around 3 p.m. on a sunny day. No one else was around. And then some guy appeared in the distance. I can't really say why, but he looked shady. Probably because he looked like he was walking straight towards me even if the pavement was pretty wide. I pretended that I didn't see him and waited for him to pass by, but he came to me, asking for money, and maybe something else that I didn't understand. I answered very firmly that no, I didn't have anything to give him, and stepped back a little, keeping my head up and trying to show that I was not disturbed. He kept coming closer to me, making me feel very uncomfortable, and started pointing his finger at my face saying, I'll kill you, repeatedly. That's when I started thinking that I might be in danger, even if this guy didn't have any visible weapon. I had no idea what he was capable of, especially as he was extremely close to me, and he was still threatening to kill me. Still trying to calmly walk away from him so as to not show him I was panicking, I looked all around for someone who might help me, but the street was still deserted. And that's when I saw a bus coming. I waved at it and the doors were already open. I climbed in without looking back. The driver's assistant told me to hurry to get in. He had seen the scene from a distance and he told me not to worry, that we just needed to get away from the crazy guy. This all happened in the span of 30 seconds, but a lot could have gone wrong in such a short amount of time. I'm glad I remained relatively calm, and I'll probably invest in pepper spray for the future. To paint a picture, I'm a guy who loves having long hair, and when this happened, I was not yet able to grow facial hair as well as I do now. So I was clean shaven and pretty much looked like I could be a girl due to some rather feminine features. I had just come out of university and gotten on the bus. There was only one place free where nobody else was sitting, so I got to nearly the back of the bus and sat next to the window, just listening to music, minding my own business. Behind me in the back of the bus were two other guys who looked like they might have been either homeless or did a job that made them have rather dirty clothing. I hadn't seen them when I came in because I tend not to look at people all that much. Social anxiety and just wanting to get home early. They seemed to be a bit drunk, and that's kind of how the next bit came to be. About 9 minutes into the bus ride, I felt a tap on my shoulder snapping me out of my staring out the window routine, and it was the guy sitting most towards the middle. I shall shorten him to DG for either dirty guy or drunk guy. Hey there, can you break a tenner? Oh, sorry, I don't have any. Whoa, that's not a voice I expected. Are you a guy or a girl? I was rather annoyed now. I'm a guy and sorry, I can't help you. At this point, I put my headphones back on and went back to looking out the window because this is where any normal, albeit rude conversation would have ended. He leaned back to his seat and had a conversation with his friend, which was becoming increasingly loud before I felt another tap on my shoulder. I sigh and take off my headphones again. Yeah? So, do you have a wiener? What? Me and my friend just made a bet on whether you do or not. And can you take off your pants? What the heck is wrong with you? At this point, the DG had gotten up while his friend was encouraging him, and blocked my way out of my seat. Come on, let us see. I'll share the money with you, alright? Dude, leave me alone. I became aware of the fact that he was a lot taller and stronger than me, and of the fact that everyone else on the bus was trying to ignore my situation. He moved closer and put his hand on my chest and rather forcefully said, "Show me now." This reflexively caused me to shove him as hard as I could. This, due to his apparently drunken state, made him fall backwards as I quickly pushed past him. The bus had just stopped, so I got out while he was struggling to get to his feet. The bus pulled away and I saw him and his friend shouting and making gestures. I stood there shaking at the bus stop waiting for the next bus for about 10 minutes. When I was a 17-year-old senior in high school, I was in my school music department's auditioned women's choir. One day, I rushed home to have dinner with my mom before going back to the school. For context, I got home around 3:30 or 3:45 and had to be back to school by 6. So I would usually take the bus that got me to school around 5:30 so that I would have time to go to the bathroom, grab some water, and relax for a few minutes before I walked into a rehearsal with several girls who were popular, snooty, and loved to mock me every chance they got. Which is also beside the point, except to say that it put me in a less than perfectly at ease kind of mental state for the night. There was a bus stop diagonally across the intersection from the small 3-story apartment building that I would usually wait at to catch a bus to the station, or I would pick up the bus to the school. I'd only been standing there for about a minute when this guy who looked to be about 45 or 55, I'll call him Dave just to have something to call him, even though I don't know his actual name. I get a bit of a creepy vibe from him from the start, but I try to be polite, being the naive 17-year-old I was and hoping that I was just being paranoid. Dave takes another step or two closer to me and starts asking me personal questions, like what my name was, my age, and what school I went to. You know, things that someone who's closer to retirement than they are to high school should not be asking or saying to a minor, even one who's 17. He continued to try to talk to me until the bus arrived, while I gave him shorter and shorter responses to his questions, and tried to make it clear that I wasn't interested in continuing the conversation any further. I got on the bus and, to my disappointment, but certainly not a surprise, he followed suit, sitting in the front-facing seat directly behind me. The entire way to the bus station, he kept whispering in my ear about how sexy I was, what great eyes I had, etc. I tried to ignore him and put my earbuds in my ears, but he pulled my earbud out of my left ear, the one closer to the window end, most likely, out of the driver's view in the mirror. He leaned closer and got his mouth so close to my ear that I could feel his breath as he spoke. "You would look beautiful on my bed. Yeah, that would be a good look for you." This is the only thing he said where I can remember an exact quote. Even now, a decade later, I can still sometimes feel his breath on my ear. I just hope that one day I'll stop feeling that same sketched out, skin is crawling feeling whenever I see anyone who looks even remotely like him. When I was in middle school, I took the city bus to school because my parents couldn't drive me and no school buses routed to my neighborhood. I didn't live in a very good place, but I never felt unsafe, probably because I was a kid and I thought myself invincible. That morning, I got on the bus to go to school. 6th grade at the time, so I was about 12. But let me tell you, I've always looked much younger than my age. It was decently crowded, so I go to my usual spot in the back. A few stops go by and then a man gets on and sits right next to me. It's been about 10 years now, but I still remember how it looked. Tall, thin, with long straight black hair. There was maybe 1 or 2 seats open, so it wasn't weird that he was next to me at first. I just figured he sat in the first seat that he saw open. But then he started to talk to me. I can't remember what he said at first, but being early in the morning and already peeved that I had to share my space with him, I just made vague, disinterested noises at him. And then he asked where I was going. And that's when my spidey senses started to tingle. Because obviously it was early morning and I'm a child, so I'm going to school. So I said, "School," in a dull way. I realize now he was probably looking for me to tell him which school. A few stops went by and the bus opened up more, so I quickly went and found another empty seat. Not 5 minutes later, he follows and sits right next to me again and still tries to get me to talk to him. He asked my name. I look to the front of the bus and see some 8th graders that I know from school and from riding this bus. My animal brain screams at me to find safety in the pack. I move up to the front of the bus and plant myself in the middle of them and basically press myself into them and give them help me eyes. The guy moves again and sits directly in front of me. He asks my name again, and one of the boys I'm sitting with, G, quickly calls me by a fake name and turns his body so he's kind of shielding me and carries on a conversation with me until we get to our school. The group of 8th graders basically formed a circle around me, and we huddled off the bus, and I turned to make sure the creep didn't follow us. Thankfully, he didn't follow. But for the next few weeks, I called either the earlier or later bus in case he was on it again. And since the bus stop was right in front of my school, I was afraid he knew where I went and would show up. But I never saw him again, thankfully. I was on my way back home from a late-night session at the gym. The gym is right next to my campus, but my flat was on the complete other side of the city, so I was definitely making sure that I caught one of the last buses. Otherwise, it was a long, long walk back. I got to the bus stop and it was empty, except for one older guy who looked pretty disheveled and out of it. Already, this was setting off alarm bells in my mind, so I stood far away from him and began to wait. The bus tracker said that the next bus wouldn't be for another 15 minutes. Dang it. Oh well. I put my headphones in and started listening to one of my podcasts to pass the time, all the while making sure I kept the man within my peripheral vision. It should be noted at this point that I have dwarfism. I am 4'0" and about 80 pounds, and I'm used to unwanted attention. It was against my better judgment that I was even out this late by myself in an unfamiliar part of town. I must have let my guard slip because I suddenly felt a hand on my shoulder, and the man was standing right next to me. Too close. I looked up at him and he was saying something to me, so I took my headphones out to hear him. You all right there, pal? I was saying that I've never seen one of you before. He was swaying and grinning at me. I'm all right, thanks. What bus are you getting? I didn't want to answer that truthfully, but there were only 2 buses left to come that night. I said it was the other one, and he looked disappointed. Always wanted to meet one of you. He stood there and stared at me for what felt like a whole minute. I felt his eyes all over me. Now I think I understand what people mean when they say they felt like a piece of meat. Eventually he said, "Do you do it?" I've had some inappropriate questions from strangers before, but that took the biscuit. I should have said that it was none of his business, but I found myself saying yes uncomfortably. He seemed to contemplate that for a while, amused by the idea. What's it like down there? I've always wanted to know. From his tone, he sounded excited. I took a couple steps away from him. This time, I was more prepared. It's not really your business. I was thinking about how long the walk would be back home. He was getting the bus that I needed, and I didn't know where the other bus went. Was it worth going through with a lie? I didn't know. I suspected that he would get on the same bus as me regardless. He took a step closer. This was the moment I actually got scared. He saw me step backwards and didn't care. He knew I was uncomfortable and he didn't care. That means it's big, he laughed. I bet it does. I've always wanted to. That was it. I wish I had said, screw off or leave me alone, or something, but I was too scared. I need to go, I blurted, and walked as briskly as I could without running. It would take him no effort at all to catch up to me. I pictured him walking behind me with his much longer legs, but I didn't want to look. I walked for a couple minutes before I finally glanced back. He was still at the bus stop, but he had moved about 10 feet to stand at the edge of it. I could only see his silhouette against the light of the bus stop, but I could tell that he was watching me. I turned around a corner street just to get out of sight. I walked the full hour and a half home, picturing him following me the whole way. It creeps me out to this day.